further ado, let's dive deep into this topic. So the first question is how has the post-COVID-19 how has the post-COVID-19 role of automation and remote operations changed the approach to investments in new technologies? So what has been the most significant breakthrough in the development of digital technologies in 2021? And so I'm going to call on Manuel first to answer that one.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning, everyone. That's a really good question. So just let me start with something over here before getting into the topic. To me, I mean, there is no post-COVID-19 yet, right? So we're still going through this situation, but all the different oil and gas companies, and not just the oil and gas industry itself, so many other industries, they are understanding how to live with and to interact with. So there is the first thing. There is no post-COVID yet. But in the other hand, so this situation took everybody in a big surprise. So what we've been seeing is, urgency all over the place. And I said all over the place because this was just, one hard stop for the whole industry. And some industries or some companies, they were just starting their journey into the digital transformation, applying digital technologies, etc. Some others, they were more deep into that. So that's what we call it, the digital maturity. So it depends where you are into that journey, how level of maturity you are on adopting digital technology is basically where you were asking for and where your urgency is. So automation has been the motor of the industry. But in this case, in this moment, it was a huge urgency to get more deep into the automation. So yesterday, some of the panels were talking about this, and they were, very focused on the exploration and product and the exploration phase. And they have been working with digital technologies for more than a decade. So more than 10 years working with that, adopting more and more and more and more. But then when you look into the other side, into the operations, into the field operations, so you continue seeing a lot of people going to the field, gathering information manually, etc. So the urgency is there. When the COVID hit and the low prices start, getting worse and worse. So a lot of people, they had to lay off 100 people were laid off. So the urgency for automation increased, and the first step, and that's where the technologies, basically the digital technology start playing here. It was having more devices in the field, being able to deploy more eyes and more sense into the processes, and then just moving that in an easy way. So I think one of the great technologies that we start seeing here breaking through on this industry was one of them. It was the development of wireless devices, being able to easy deploy and easy configure and transfer that information safely. And then the other one, it was a combination in between the cloud, allowing to get easy access everywhere to every single piece of the equipment assets, but as well, having in mind the security of that transfer of information. So that's basically what we have been seeing those years or this year basically in the industry.
Thanks for that, Manuel. And Laurent and Augusto, it would be really great to have your comments on this question as well. Laurent, could you go first, please?
Yes, thank you, Amanda, and hello, everyone. Really happy to be here with you today on this Mexico Oil and Gas Summit panel. Let me come back very briefly, to TechnipFMC digital strategy, because you will see COVID has changed some things, and that's quite interesting. So, the overall, I would say, value proposition for TechnipFMC in digital is to go beyond traditional products, services, and projects by fusing and augmenting our domain knowledge and core offering with digital. And a big part of it is actually, automation. That's a huge element of our transformation. And ultimately, the ambition for TechnipFMC is to provide what we call hybrid solutions that are combining our traditional film and digital. Pre-COVID, we had three main pillars in our strategy. One was becoming a data-centric company. Second was developing intelligent product and asset. And third was driving towards autonomous operations. And as you imagine, this third pillar has become critical during the pandemic. We have had to ensure business continuity, deliver to our clients our projects, our products, our services, while being in this pandemic. And what does that mean concretely? We've been obliged to inspect our suppliers remotely. Our customers have inspected our facilities, our manufacturing sites remotely as well. So we have had to use new technologies and create new procedures to completely adapt to this new environment. And we could see that it has massively accelerated the adoption of video assistance technologies, for instance. Not talking about Teams or Zoom here, but really talking about technologies that are developed for industrial environment, for offshore environment with low bandwidth, that can leverage any type of camera feed, smart glasses, smartphone cameras, and many other type of camera feed. And the goal was basically to be able to have a full remote video inspection, connect remotely to field personnel with experts, or connect with customers or suppliers that are, onshore or remotely located. So we have seen companies like Philbit, Vibe, LibreStream, Sitecall, and many others that have grown a lot in this landscape. So if we look now at the broader automation, it's a little bit of the same story. I think COVID is really a catalyzer that is accelerating even more the necessity of automation in the industry. We want to remove field personnel, whether these field resources are onshore or offshore. And a good example at TechnipFMC could be our iComplete offering, which enable operators to automate their frac pad. We are able to remove people from the red zone by remotely and safely automate and control equipment at distance. So COVID, we have seen now the trend with our customers that automated equipment, products, and solutions, and fully remote operation has become really a key theme of transformation in the industry.
I fully agree with all the comments. I would like to add the importance of collecting the data itself. So there is a lot of companies that should learn from the experience of working remotely in the offices. Now we need to bring those learnings and do that in the operational side. And for doing that in the operational side, we still have many of customers that need to come to the basics and start to collect the data in real time with quality, availability, and evaluate how to make the best use of edge computing, for example, processing this data close to the field or bringing to the cloud. That's a decision that each customer will take based on their maturity and their best practices. So I would emphasize the learnings. We need to extend the learnings from the office to the field. And an important element is to start collecting data with quality, come back to the basics, and start making the question, how many sensors I have in an operational field per produced barrel? This is an important metric because companies that have more sensors will be able to faster automate and take real-time decisions. And it's not a common metric in our industry, but we should start to looking at that because we'll be a measure of maturity to automate.
All really great points there. So Augusto, just leading off of that, what is the best path that will determine an ideal data strategy, as well as a digital management infrastructure development plan for individual operators and clients, whether we're talking about exploration or operations?
That's a very good point. We need a foundation. Usually is a software platform where we can integrate databases, real-time streaming. And with this integration, we need to build on top of that the new concept of engineering. We need to rethink engineering. I like it very much in the previous question that even Manuel and Laurent mentioned about reviewing the processes. So we need to review the process in a way that we automate them and we automate equipments from the collection of data from the sensors, that is the IoT, the Internet of Things. We need to start to run the physical models in real time, steady state, and even transient state. That's very challenging because some problems in the industry don't even have simulators capable to run in real time, but that's something that we need to have. And we need to couple all of that with the machine learning models that represents the mathematical approach for supporting decisions. So we need, in fact, to unleash innovation. We need to allow champion engineers that know how to interpret data and automate processes, to apply emergent technologies on top of that, and innovate their processes or the way that they do engineering. So the starting point, my opinion, is to have a software platform that allows to couple data quality, engineering simulation, machine learning models in a way that engineers can build and innovate the way that we operate.
Good stuff, Augusto. Eugene, could you feed into this question, please? What are your thoughts around it?
Well, first of all, thanks a lot for, it's a great honor to be here. I'm Eugene Spiropoulos from Yokogawa, and I agree a lot with everything that Augusto said. I think particularly pre-COVID, there was a question, what is digital transformation? It was more like a buzzword. Post-COVID, everybody knows exactly what digital transformation is. It's either what's the journey you were on that you're seeing the value of, or what you wish you were doing before COVID hit. And I think that's brought a lot of clarity to the purpose of information management for the customer. And building out the right data infrastructure, like Augusto said, it really depends a lot on the data that you have. And you want to avoid garbage in, garbage out. And to do that, you do want to have, like Augusto said, that solid data infrastructure platform. The challenge there is that many people in, many engineering houses and stakeholders deliver in different formats for the customer. So that's a pretty difficult thing to overcome. And I think what we're seeing post-COVID, and I think prior to COVID as well, is more of an embrace of standards, of different sort of delivery or engineering standards. And one of these things that has been enabled, or that has enabled this, is the unified architecture for data structures that we see with things like OPC UA. And a lot of these standards are built on this going forward. So to bring this sort of platforms together and build out the right data infrastructure for a customer moving forward, all these sort of has to be considered for the customer. And taking advantage of new technologies like edge computing, the cloud, but more primarily artificial intelligence. And that leverages value all through the customer lifecycle. You can utilize artificial intelligence like Yokogawa does during project phases for translating databases and enabling the digital transformation of the project itself. But then you also leverage that capability throughout the lifecycle of the facility, predictive asset maintenance and so on. So building out a data structure that allows us to leverage that going forward and improve those learnings, I think that's the path a lot of customers are on today. Yokogawa calls that IA to IA, industrial automation to industrial autonomy. And a big factor there is the human sustainability factor, getting people out of dangerous places, utilizing robotics and a number of other different technologies for the purpose of that goal. So I think those are the things that need to be considered today to build out the right data infrastructure moving forward.
Thanks for that, Eugene. And this is a great time for Laurent to feed in further. So Laurent, what are your comments on this question?
Yeah, so I think, Eugene, you have highlighted very important elements around data architecture, around having common standards in our industry. I'd like to come back a little bit on it. I'll explain slightly, Technip FMC data strategy that will probably resonate with many of you. But basically, when we talk about digital transformation, we are talking about data, how we extract it, we manage it, we share it, and try to do that as quickly and efficiently and securely as possible. So we have basically three pillars in our data-centric journey. The first one is investing on data management. So this is a little bit what Eugene explained about structuring and connecting our data. We need to define data models that are shared across the company, leveraged by different discipline, and business unit, but even beyond. This is something we are facing as an industry, which is the lack of shared standards in the industry. So for Technip FMC, working with our customers, we work with Shell, BP, Exxon, whoever, Pemex, and they have different standards. So every time we have a project, we need to adapt, to their requirements. And I do believe as an industry to fulfill our digital transformation and data-centric journey, we will need much more alignment on standards. So there are many, different GIPs and initiatives ongoing from SHIFOS, READY, IOGP work, and etc. But I think as an industry, it's very important we start to define the basic standards. The second pillar in our data-centric journey is basically a data platform. I mean, we've talked about cloud, we've talked about IoT and H2 cloud, but you need to have one or two places where you store and transform your data. And this is a key component because this is where you handle efficiently your data. And the last is data governance. I think we need to, at the end of the day, make sure we own our data, we can trust this data. We have cybersecurity coming into play in this data governance as well, because when you connect to customer systems, when you connect to suppliers, you really need to have a strong data governance in place to be able to work efficiently together. And if you have data management, a robust data platform, and a data governance in place, then I think you can start to have a meaningful impact on data quality, for instance. We've talked about garbage in, garbage out, but this data quality is going to be the results of applying data management standards, of having a data platform that is connected, and robust data governance.
Very good points there. So let's move the discussion forward and discuss specifically products, services, and the assets themselves. So the question is, which digital products, services, and assets will determine the future drive of industry players towards full automation and the complete availability and accessibility of remote operation capabilities? I would like Ricardo to please join us and answer this question first. Hi, Ricardo.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you very much, and greetings to everyone. I'm Ricardo Velázquez with Belden, Latin America. Yeah, so at Belden, we think that, and I'm going to answer your question as it is, splitting between digital services and assets to make a big difference. So we think that really active monitoring, vulnerability assessment on the cybersecurity part is going to be like a big trend. On the other side, cloud-based and edge computing together with remote access solutions that allow you to get into the field and make remote diagnostics or remote vulnerability assessment will be the drivers on the digital part. On the services, it's a complete different story. We think that OT networks and the services around them will be driving a lot of the service level agreements that companies around the world will be utilizing for their oil and gas facilities. Of course, we all know that there is a lot of lack of training and a lack of those type of hybrid engineers that can handle automation and IT in a way that they can accommodate an environment with OT networks that are difficult, that do have a redundancy requirements, availability requirements, different from the enterprise type of the network. So there is a need for a lot of training on that area. And then on the asset side, we think that a network operations center or the so-called security operations center, whether it's in-house or it's outsourcing, are going to be the types of assets and projects that many companies on the government side and on the private sector are going to be making. That's pretty much what we think here in our organization, Amanda.
Thanks for that. Fernando, could you feed into this, please? I'd like to hear your points.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, no, I pretty much agree with Mr. Ricardo was saying about it. The portfolio of digital products and technologies is growing a lot and really quick. I mean, IoT, augmented reality, artificial intelligence. There is a lot of technologies right now that are growing really quick, again, because of all this big situation. But I will go one step back and start thinking about from the strategy point of view first, in order to align your strategy, as Mr. Lauren mentioned, with your digital strategy. So that way you can actually get the best benefits out of these technologies. I'll give you like an example, a pretty recent example. A lot of the companies, they are looking for ways to reduce costs, improve the return of investments for all the stakeholders. And to do that, they try to keep the assets running as much as possible. They try to keep the facilities running as much as possible and reduce the downtime part. So keeping that in mind as a center of the strategy, we can start develop the right model and start picking up the right technologies up. And like give you an example for some facilities, maybe you have identified that these elements, these turbines, these motors, these generators are your key elements that you need to have running all the time. Then around that area, we need to start understand what is the data driven about these elements. And then we can start analyzing and picking up some technologies to make sure we can keep those elements running as much as possible. So we can use a combination of maybe IoT with cloud computing and artificial intelligence in order to make sure we can actually have these things running all the time. But that's how you elaborate from the strategy point of view through the implementation. That is always key. And I want to add that all this digital transformation, the right methodologies to approach this is agile. So you are going to see more agile involved in all this implementation because digital transformation is an ongoing process all the time. So we need to start thinking about here like in iterations, in sprints, to make sure we are getting better and better and better every time until we arrive to the point that we want to be. And even when we arrive to that point, I'm pretty sure there will be another transformation because we will have enough information to move to the next step. So agile, working in even with some waterfall combinations for construction is going to be something that we are going to see more and more. Now on services is something that is been tremendously changing with all these remote operations and digital transformation. And here I want to emphasize now that you no longer have limitations of areas. You can bring expertise all around the world to look into some specific problems now, instead of just try to find people around and moving people from one place to another one. Now with all these remote conditions, remote operations, even using augmented reality, you can have people from different parts of the world looking into what the operators are looking at, checking the data where they are checking that, making sure, I mean, this is a new way to play. This is actually against one of the, it's going to make us rethink the pre-COVID paradigm, where we always think that we need to have somebody there or the human contact is needed for this type of teams. Those things are pretty much already changing, and we know that. Here at W, for example, one of the most important parts is the remote testing, making sure that all customers, all stakeholders, they can look into our products, they can make sure that the high spec products that we design here are according to the specs. But again, with all these limitations, we need to using technologies to make sure that they can attend this remote testing, making sure that they can ask the question, they can see the functionality of all the units. So on the service part is again changing here for us. And the other part that I want to emphasize is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a must now. So you cannot imagine anything of this right now without proper cybersecurity. And this is going to require, again, continuous evaluation of your installations. Every day you will see more and more equipment working in the layer 3, more IoT equipment. You need to be able to protect that equipment. And even if you have protection right now, that doesn't mean it's not going to be affected on the next month when something new appears. So this is going to be always an ongoing process. And it's, again, that is the reason I said the way to embrace all these changes are going to be using more agile methodologies, where we run interactions, sprints, and making sure that we are always on top of where we want to be. So cybersecurity is something that is going to be a must right now, because there is a literally war outside, and we need to protect all this data. We need to protect all this infrastructure. So it's going to be part of all these new portfolios of products and services.
Great, thank you, Fernando. Augusto, can you please share your thoughts on digital products, services, and assets?
For sure. I like very much the approach of Fernando and Ricardo about the technology. I'd like in this question bring another perspective, the human perspective in the table. So to have the availability of the remote operations will depend on human adoption. That's, in fact, our journey related to technology. It's the human being transferring mechanical activities to technology and empowering themselves of more human activities. So for doing that, we need to have openness for innovation. So in the digital transformation, digital is the context, but what is important is transform the way that we do things, the way that we think about things, and the way that we use the technology. For doing that, we need two perspectives. The executive perspective. So the executives must inspire people for embracing the new, and companies need to be ready to focus on humans in this process to improve adoption and reskill people, relocate people based in these new processes that they are going to create. So you have to create a human look to this scenario. And on the other hand, from the teams that want to innovate, they need to properly communicate to executives the value that they are generating. The executives are more opener to listen because they learned about from the COVID period that we are living. But we need to create business cases and communicate and empathize with executives to help them to take the decisions that are going to accelerate the full automation of the fields.
Really great points there, Augusto. So thank you, all of you, for answering those questions. I would like to move over to Q&A because we do have quite a few questions from delegates. But before we do, I would just like to call on each of you for some overall, overarching, high-level final remarks around the subject matter. In about 1 minute, please. All right, and then I have a personal question that I'm going to pose that I would like you to include in your final remarks as well. And so we're talking about, digital automation, et cetera. In your final remarks, let me know what is the one aspect that keeps you up at night around this. All right, so Eugene, you're first.
Sorry, muted. Thank you very much, Amanda. I'll go ahead. So I think final thoughts on this, around this is, there are a lot of technologies enabling digital transformation now. And I think the future of unlocking this for industries going forward is connecting these solutions together and building forward. And that is going to involve information infrastructures. It's going to involve the enablers for this: data collection, IIoT, edge computing, the cloud, and the information thread that sort of goes through all of this. And how much can be enabled by this in the sense of remote operations, unmanned operations, and so on. A lot of this factors in with the way the life cycle that customers manage, or that these industries manage going forward, and how sustainable that life cycle is. Standards on upcoming, or standards available today, OPC UA, open process automation, that sort of extend the life cycle of process facilities, extend the life cycle, the capabilities of information integration and utilization. These are capabilities that are being unlocked for these industries going forward. And where this takes us and where this takes the offshore industry and other industries as well, I think to good places. So it's a very optimistic future. But what keeps me up at night regarding this, it has to be the security around this stuff. Because as we talk about IIoT, we talk about open process automation, now you're adding more devices, kind of creating more surface area. So what's positive about that is the advances in security infrastructure and security capabilities. So these new technologies, these utilize security layer 2 technologies. So the idea is we could make industrial facilities, we could make plants more secure, utilizing these technologies and enabling these technologies going forward. And I think this is, it is a positive thing overall, but it is something that really must be considered as we move forward.
Really great points, Eugene. And I especially appreciated the point you made about that this is not just in the oil and gas industry, but in other industries. And so many of the supply chain companies that have varying verticals outside of oil and gas, they need to also be prepared for those verticals, because this is a change in the way that we do business. Thanks for that. Fernando.
Thank you, Amanda. I have to agree with everything that Eugene said. It's, just adding a little more on this, digital transformation is here, as we mentioned at the beginning, was mentioned. We start with this journey before actually COVID, but now the speed of the transformation is faster and faster. It's moving faster. Some of the companies, they are trying to catch up some of the changes that they didn't do at the beginning. And we will see this faster and faster. So digital transformation is going to continue. And the companies that are able to understand and adapt and align the strategies from top to the strategic execution, they will get tremendous benefits out of all this new technology. Again, integration of these technologies playing together will allow us to get better return of investment, will allow us to keep things working more time, and at the end of the day, be more productive, do more with less. Regarding the part that keep me at night, it's again cybersecurity and regulations. Regulations are changing. So what we thought it was not possible before, probably now is changing. We are seeing more data regulation. We are seeing more regulations on how we actually design equipment so they are ready for for this new world, for this new IoT, how they can be integrated into this new game. So all those things are playing a big role in how you do everything from the conception now, from the design part, so they can play their part during this big picture and big strategy. So putting all those pieces together right now that we haven't finished COVID, and there's still some regulations moving and target moving, is complex. And adding in top of that, some of these technologies are still pretty new for the persons, for the people. Is that actually another layer of complexity there? So maybe virtual reality has been there for a couple of months or couple of years, but not all the people have been using it. Same thing for augmented reality during FAT testing. Maybe has been there we have been using for the last 3 years, for only few people. And now this is expanding to more and more. So that area, that new person trying to use these new technologies is what all the risks associated around that. That's what keeps me up at night. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Fernando. The regulation part is always interesting. Is it the regulation that's going to be there first, or will industry move first and the regulation come second? Thanks for that. Manuel.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, everyone. Really, really good comments. A lot of really good information from everyone. Final remarks. So basically, I mean, over here, as everybody mentioned, digital transformation is here. It started several years ago. It's here. There are more urgency for. But one thing that everybody needs to look at is to have this 360-degree view, right? It is not just going in some direction. Some of them, they put the technology in front. Some of them put the business case in front, but there are so many things that we need to take care about. So Fernando mentioned safety, security, all those pieces is something that we need to take care. Something that I didn't hear about when Augusto, Eugene, Lauren were talking about data management and data quality, that it was really good. Actually, comments from them. It was the contextualize that data that is extremely important. I was just making some comments with coworkers related to data. And then if you look at this moment, if I said 40 degrees C, a lot of people relate 40 degrees C with COVID-19, right? So because we don't have the context of the data. I mean, data is 40 degrees C. It is clean. It has quality. It has everything. But if without the context, we can take directions that we don't want to go, right? So it should be extremely important. That's what I said, 360-degree view of what you are looking at. That's important. So that's basically actually what keeps me up at night. So people that just take one single direction and they don't look at the size or the back, it is important.
Thanks for that, Manuel. We always need to have a forward look. Okay, Augusto.
Okay, once again, I would like to thank the organization. Great panel, great comments. I like it very much to learn things here today. I got great insights. From my perspective, I should emphasize the mindset of innovation. So companies, the technology is available. We can reinvent and review the processes, but companies need to unleash the innovation capabilities of the companies, putting engineers, skilled engineers, young engineers wanting to revolutionize our industry to deliver value. So companies need to create a place safe for innovation. And related to that, what takes me up at night is the fact that innovation should not leave anyone behind. It's the human focus on that and the barrier to adoption. And how do we innovate in an inclusive way? How can we have an inclusive innovation process that not includes people, but also includes the environment in the equation as something to be respected and be treated properly? So that's what takes me at night, how to innovate, including people, not leaving anyone behind, and including environment as an important driver for selecting technologies and best innovation approach.
Thanks for that, Augusto. It's almost as if digital will take care of so many things across the kaleidoscope of this industry. And I'll have a comment on that in my closing. Thanks for that. Ricardo.
Yes, Amanda, thank you. Well, I think that for the closing remarks, I would like to highlight the immediate, extremely important need for training for the new generation of engineers. I've seen young professionals working in the South US region, people in countries like Colombia, Mexico, Peru, the rest of Latin America. And the common thing happening is that we engineers lack of this hybrid technology point of view together with automation. This hybrid engineer is definitely required, and I will encourage several companies, automation vendors, to enhance or to support those young engineers coming, and apart from that, well, on the second instance, whether it's a young or a senior professional, many of the people in the industry, we need the tools and the managerial tools to be able to scale up the information that comes from the field and be able to effectively scale up the requirements and the needs for investment on technologies, on cybersecurity, on asset management, on monitoring, on the cloud-based access that will help the human factor be better, that will help people be on the safe areas, avoid sending people to the dangerous, hazardous locations. I think investment on companies on that is very important, but first, the ones that detect the need on the field are required to effectively scale up that requirement to the upper C levels of the organization. And what keeps me up at night, well, you all know that Belden, we have been servicing for several years and decades, several companies on OT networks already with the Hirschman, Lomberg, pros of brands with Tofino, cybersecurity, and Tripwire. So what really keeps us up at night, it's the responsibility of reacting on the best way in which we can help our customers remediate their issues. And the most important part of that, I think, is change management detection, because the human error is always there. There is always a risk associated with configuring something or setting up a cybersecurity monitoring platform. And when customers come to us for help, the help is immediate. So that is kind of like very challenging, and I look forward to continue helping our customers. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Ricardo. Very relevant comments, and indeed putting the human factor at everything. I think we've learned a lot over the last 18 months about bringing that back into our daily business lives. And finally, but not least, Laurent.
Thank you, Amanda. And thank you, everyone. Really enjoyed the panel with all of you. I'm just going to conclude, Amanda, quickly with what keeps me up at night. I think if I look at it, it would be to materialize the business transformation and business impact. I think this is really something that we have to jointly address together with our business units and our operations when we are deploying our digital transformation. It sounds, simple enough to develop a product, a cloud platform or a software, but how do you make sure that you get the expected benefits? And this is really what is, for me, the last step at the end is to actually materialize this business transformation. And honestly, you need to not only have a new solutions, a new way of working and a transformation, you need as well to make sure you have a way to measure it, to follow it, to have the full change management in place to get the expected results and scale it. And this is really what I'm spending a lot of time on it, is ensuring together with our business that we actually have the benefits of the full digital transformation. That's my I would say topic that I have in my head the most is materializing this business impact.
I would totally agree with you, Laurent. And we're definitely experiencing a cultural change within our industry, and that takes time and a lot of hard work to get that forward. So thank you to all of you. We have some questions and a bit of time before the closing. So I am gonna basically just say whoever gets their mic off of mute first and wants to answer the question, all right? So let's do some speed questions and answers. So the first question from our delegates is, how can investors and operators best distinguish between automation technologies with bright futures and those perhaps with less realistic prospects? Who's gonna be first to post?
Well, Amanda, it really depends on, in my opinion, and I'll let space for another comment on the results that you can get from this technology. So as fast as you can get that result, that is what will definitely drive. But let's hear someone else.
This is Fernando. From my point of view, again, it has to come from the strategy design, that what you want to do, and then you need to align that strategy with your digital strategy to see what is the technology that you think is going to help you. You need to be able to measure what you want to do, to get some KPIs in place, as Mr. Lauren mentioned, so you can get the real benefits out of the technologies. Maybe, and this is an example, one technology is working pretty good for somebody, but maybe it's not the same case for a different one. And everything is related in your overall view. What do you want to achieve and how do you want to do it? So my recommendation is start thinking first on top, what do you want to do? What is on the core of your strategy? And then based on that, you can align the elements that you might need. And maybe for what you want to do is a better IoT solution with cloud computer, or perhaps you only need I don't know, machine learning, or maybe augmented reality and virtual reality, things like that. But this also depends, from my point of view, on the elaboration, on the proper elaboration of the strategy, and then the strategy implementation.
Anyone else want to answer that before we move on?
Well, just adding, sorry, just adding one topic. I mean, that was the point of view from the operator that I 100% agree. Then you have the investor point of view that is completely different. So probably they look at more the capabilities this company or this startup has to continue to maintain and keep up, with the next developments and new version of the software or product that are developing. So there are two different points of view, two different answers. Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
Yes, no, just wanted to make here a parallel because this is something I deal with a lot regarding startup technologies. How do you, select the right technology, the right startup? Here it's about automation, but I think from our point of view, sometimes you can look at great technologies and poor value proposition for these technologies. And very often we come back to what's the problem statement and what's the business value proposition. And it's not necessarily the technology, it's really about this business value proposition. So we are screening lots of technologies, lots of cloud platforms, lots of different things. And at the end of the day, at least at Technip.FMC, it's really the value proposition that resonates with our business unit that's going to bring value in our company. So it's not only the technology, you should look at it I would say holistically, with the business value proposition. And when you have the two, then you could say it's probably a safe bet to invest on this technology because you have a good business alignment. And that's often a mistake from startups, that they showcase their technology, best features, best technology, but poor business alignment with the problem statement, basically.
Okay, moving on. How will automation and remote operation technologies continue to be adapted to function within the confines of aging infrastructure?
I'd like to take that one. And I think that's a pretty big issue for customers in most industries now. And the legacy aging infrastructures and all these new technologies coming into play today, and how to make them all play together. And I think that the idea around that comes back to what many people on this panel have said, and that's leveraging how you use information and translate information from one system to another system. Essentially, your information strategy or your information modeling across the organization. The technologies that, the advantage I think today is technologies that are in the market or coming into the market, like Yokogawa's collaboration information server. These have the ability to connect to legacy equipment or sit on top of legacy equipment, but also supports new protocols coming in and essentially, put all data on the same level. So you can have, it's essentially a bridge toward the future. So bridging the past way of doing things and past data infrastructures with the future way of doing things at the same time. And there's that sort of horizontal connection of information, but then there's also that vertical connection of information as well. So having multiple teams collaborate on the same engagement platforms or operational platforms. And that way you can translate those data structures upward as well. And I think that's the best way to sort of leverage that. It cannot be technology alone. It has to be what is, first of all, our information infrastructure. What's our plan going forward for how we deal with information real time or assets or however the case may be. And how are we going to sort of get all that information together in context, bridging the past and the future and move forward that way. And I think that's the strategy a lot of customers are looking to do today.
One more reply to that question, but we do have to move forward. We're almost out of time. Anyone want to feed into that? Okay, moving on. All right, so you all have mentioned training. You've mentioned the people, and regulation has been mentioned. So the question is, how will automation technologies interact with Mexico's labor regulatory environment? I need one person to tackle this.
I can take it.
Okay, so, thank you, Ricardo.
In the midst of regulatory environments growing and standardization spreading up, I think that the automation technologies together with artificial intelligence, looking into configuration management, into compliance, comparison of your work with a particular standard, that will help a lot people get on the safest spot when working on a project, when developing something, whether it's civil engineering on the electrical side or the communications area. I think that, of course, automation, having the opportunity of your technology to help you comply with the standard, whether it's artificial intelligence or just change management detection, I think that's going to help a lot for keeping our engineers safe on the regulatory environment.
Thanks for that. And last question, 30 seconds or less. I'm going to call on each of you. What is the biggest risk companies must take into account in terms of cybersecurity? Fernando, 30 seconds or less.
Always have and analyze what is the latest firmware in your products, making sure that you always have audits in your systems. So they have running with the latest revisions to make sure that if something new appears, somebody can go and install the proper protections in all the devices. And that's going to be one ongoing process all the time to mitigate those risks.
All right, Eugene.
monitoring, visibility of your threats, knowledge of where your threat areas are. I think many customers need to have that sort of visibility, that sort of monitoring, and the strategy for response. And I think building out that strategy is something that customers need to consider today. And there are technologies and services capable of doing that today.
Thanks. Ricardo.
Yeah, I think that the biggest risk, Amanda, will be the partner that you choose to help you out with your cybersecurity. So if you're going to marry yourself with a particular technology, selecting the right partner is, I think, is the biggest step and the biggest risk that an organization can take.
Laurent.
So just one comment, I think one of the best way to take into account cybersecurity is to actually embed cybersecurity resources in your digital delivery teams. You should not see it as a separate function. You should see it as a full team member of your product delivery teams. And that's, for me, one of the best way to make sure that in your digital developments, cybersecurity is not a checkbox somewhere in the process, but is fully integrated and embedded in your team.
Okay, Manuel.
I'm going to go back with the training people. So what happened with Colonial Pipeline was that, so sometimes you just get an email with a link and you don't realize that it was a phishing email. So training people is going to be important for just cover this part of the risk.
Augusto.
Pay attention and deep dive in your IT/OT integration architecture.
All right, thank you, thank you. All right, we've run out of time, so I do have to close the session out. Really great comments from all of you. I have to say, remote operations, automation, all the technologies we've talked about have been around before COVID, and this has been mentioned. And I have to say that, perhaps we were all talking about it more than we were actually walking about it. So, perhaps it's COVID, which has forced us as an industry to look at this at scale. We have the avenue to drastically deploy the technology and make this a necessity. Bringing data together across the entire value chain, I would say, in the energy sector and other sectors. What's key in this, though, is we are still learning. And while we take action, we'll continue to learn. But we can't take action unless we continue to learn. So I guess just a couple of other things I want to highlight is that when it comes to digital and remote operations, this is integrated and should be integrated. And our speakers have commented on this, on any HSSE and any ESG policies within our companies. And this is going to have to be driven by our leaders and adopted down the totem pole, so to speak. We mentioned training and the importance of the people that are in this industry. And I think that we've proven over the last 18 months that we are quite agile. We've proved that, but we're going to have to continue to be agile and accept this changing culture. And indeed, data and technology is going to be at the center of that. We know our culture is boom, bust, boom, bust. I would say we have a boom coming, and this will be the real test if we've actually accepted this new way of being who we are as an industry, this cultural change. So a call to action to our leaders, continue to inspire us to the companies that are here today. The work that you're doing is important to many aspects. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.